And I love telling people about being able to get my tank up in the air, but out at NTC one time, you guys talk about all the tactical things that you did
Yeah.
at NTC. I talk about the fact that my guys and I was an XO at that time, but they found this hill where you could get up enough speed getting up to it that you could actually get your tank up in the air. So I told my driver, out. I want to drive my tank and make sure it gets up in the air. And
Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is Daniel Rizzo, Cullum number 43611. We'll hear about Dan's start as a 22-year-old plebe and his later in life adventures creating a mobile kitchen. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization, most particularly International Business Machines. Dan Rizzo, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here, Paul. Thank you very much for doing this. And one thing I want to say about your efforts on behalf of the class and everything, it's great to catch up and see people that we didn't all know at school and everything. But I think it's a historical documentation, too, that, doesn't really happen in get-togethers very, very often. But
yeah, and I think it's crazy because we have the technology to record a lot of this,
right.
and so it serves a couple of purposes. But I think ultimately our children are the ones that are going to, and our grandchildren, are the ones that benefit from it.
And the historical relevance of Bumper, Dirty Bumper, or Tommy Hayslip, Tater.
I think those are two giants.
Which are awesome guys and everything, and knew them well.
I didn't get a chance to know Chris Bump or Tater at school, and I'm delighted to actually call them friends now. So
yeah. I was actually thinking about the imaginary cadet that ran for president of our class at the prep school.
Tell the story.
G.I. Rydlos was his name. And so the president of our class there was Davy Fulton.
Okay.
He was the guy who won the election and everything. But I actually had to do his campaign speech. I had to be on the ballot in order to get time in front of the class. I think we did the election in like October, November, so it was pretty early in the year, and we all didn't know each other at the prep school like ours. So we had to, had an allotted amount of time to get on stage and talk about why you should vote for, and I, explained why you should vote for G.I. Rydlos, which is actually soldier spelled backwards.
What was the idea there? Just to
have, so it's actually an idea that came from my previous college experience when I was at the University of Minnesota. It wasn't the president of the class, but just a representative, student representative for the student council or whatever.
Right. This is the Riz difference. You've literally laid out 5 different discussion points here that could keep us here for hours. That's fantastic. So, how many, for those of us who didn't go to the prep school, how many people were at the prep school, if you can recall?
I think we started with a class of 300, and I explained it as being roughly half from the regular Army, people who, were selected by their chain of command or people that knew their talents and everything. Right. And the other half was recruited athletes to West Point that weren't academically up to par. So they spent that year at the prep.
Had to brush up on a few academic skills. Yeah. And what brought you there?
I was enlisted in the Army before.
Really?
Yeah. I went to the University of Minnesota for 2.5 years. I learned a lot, but not very much academically. And
well, you certainly learned how to jury rig an election. What?
Yeah, yeah,
2.5 years at University of Minnesota, and then you went into the Army. And how long were you
yeah.
in the Army?
I was in the Army for, well, including the time at West Point, a year and
Yeah.
a half. So,
And what
or
did you
at
do in the
Prescott.
Army? What was your MOS when you went in as an
I
enlisted
was
soldier?
in '05 Charlie, which was a Signal Corps
Really?
MOS. Yeah. So after I finished at Augusta with my AIT training, I stayed down there and taught, I don't know, for about 3 months, 3 or 4 months, something like that. Yeah, I never got assigned to a regular duty assignment or anything.
And
But
by this time, you'd have been 19, 20 years old? 21?
so that brings up the next topic that we have to talk about. I got to, my birthday's in July. And
Okay.
so there's a thing which you can claim that I'm not speaking for, you're not speaking for too. There are 4 of us in our class who turned 22 within days of getting to West Point in
Really?
July. Yeah, yeah. So Keith Ramsey, Glenn Schoonover, John Roper, and me.
Now,
We're the very
served.
oldest in the class. Yeah.
I knew Keith at the academy. I knew he had served. Okay, so you turned 22 when you got there.
Yeah, just within days. We all turned 22 in the month of July, and that's the rule, that you can't have had your 22nd birthday before reporting.
Is that right? Okay, I didn't know. That's just something I didn't know. And we must have seemed like kids to you guys. Because one year, I mean, several folks have been on the podcast talked about 1 year of school. Paul Kelly, Ted Cummings went to 1 year of school, and they talked about the leavening effect that had on them.
Right. So it's not that, people are people. I got to keep. So another talking point is being a beanhead in F3.
Right. That's true.
And I was told many times, we know what your problem is. You're old and you have a bitch against, people younger than you, correcting
nice
you.
when somebody can give you that assessment.
Yeah, that's that.
That was helpful.
Well, it did teach me, don't try to assign reasons for other people's performance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, was the upperclassmen come on with that because you were basically older than most of them?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and especially the ones that were particular hazes, and there were more than a few.
And F Troop was notorious when we were plebes. F Troop was a company that we avoided because I was in the 4th Regiment, so we avoided your area for the because of the spirit of the upper class.
Yeah.
So let's go back to Brooklyn.
I still have the memory of being in formation for dinner out in front on the apron in front of the plane, and some yearling coming up to me after hearing me get just roasted and said, "Rizzo, are you having a bad day?" And my reply was, "No, sir, I'm having a bad year." A little bit bogus, but
it doesn't matter what age you were. That was right.
Yeah.
Well, let's tie it all back together. The 22-year-old plebe. Let's go all the way back to Brooklyn, New York, which where you grew up, right?
Well, only till 3rd grade. Then we moved to Suffern, which was just south of West Point. Yeah.
So going to
that was
university. What was your head as a high schooler? What was your like?
Well, I was pretty smart. I managed to do well enough on the PSAT that I was a national honor finalist.
Okay.
And won my dad worked for IBM, so.
And why Minnesota? What was the first move that you were thinking?
IBM had a big plant there.
Really?
There were 2 ongoing organizations in Rochester, Minnesota, when we moved there in '70, I believe it was. But
this is a family show. Riz. So, but can you tell us what it was that ended your career at Minnesota? With
Oh,
this
it's just the fact that it was academics. Yeah,
academic.
I went. So
Okay, good.
the first year I did okay for the first two semesters,
Okay.
and then spring semester of my freshman year, I think I passed one class. Um, so that put my scholarship in jeopardy, but they never made the job contingent on that. Yeah, it was like after conversations with my dad that didn't go well, and it was like, there's no money, and I'm not going to do anything for you if you're not in school and everything. So,
Right.
um, I was running out of options and thought that the Army was a good thing to do at the time. I still remember at least the last name of my recruiter in Minneapolis. Goodman was his name, so Sergeant Goodman.
Good. Sergeant Goodman said, "Here's a road out. At least
Yeah,
a road
yeah,
that will sustain you for a while."
yeah.
How'd you find it when you went in?
Um,
Basic
it
training and all
was.
the rest.
Uh, I had the same kind of behavioral problems that I did at West Point, and attracted the same kind of attention there. But
Well,
I mean, it's not difficult, That's
yeah,
and
right.
like I said, I never got stationed at a permanent duty station, and so the training environment I always thought was, it was fine. It was no
And
problem at all.
how did the idea of West Point come to you?
So when I was in basic training, our first sergeant screened out about half a dozen of us who scored high enough on the ASVAB getting in, and you
Okay.
couldn't be married and you couldn't have any dependents either.
Yeah, sure.
We had to take the SATs again, and that was the lowest score I ever got on the SATs when I was in basic training, and I attribute that to being taught to be stupid. That's part of basic training. That's
A little bit. Well, the Academy had its own version of it. Let's put it that way. So, but anyway,
yeah. Well, the academy,
not that we would ever impugn the Rockbound Highland Home on this official or unofficial podcast about it, but they
yeah.
didn't.
So I ended up doing basic training roughly 3 times. I mean, at regular Army and at the prep school, and then at
Right.
Beast Barracks, and yeah, Beast Barracks had a different goal in mind after it was all said and done than regular basic training, or.
So were you one of those in Beast that kind of sorted everyone out? We so greatly valued people like you who knew the basics and were not stressed about shoes and belt buckles and.
Yeah. I mean, I think I helped out a bunch in my basic training company, where in my Beast company and everything. I don't remember
Right.
my Beast company. I'm astounded at some of the guys that come on and remember who their roommates were and who. I remember my Plebe year roommate because I had the same roommate both semesters.
Really?
That was
That's unusual.
T-Bone. T. Williams was, yeah.
Okay.
Which was very unusual too. And first semester, Tom Wojtek was our third roommate, and
Okay.
he was fun. He was one of the youngest in our class too.
There you go.
Yeah.
We were going to try to balance out your aged grumpiness, I guess.
Yeah. And then there was another guy who
Here's a young guy with lots of.
I forget
giggle.
who lived. What's that?
Here's a young guy who likes to giggle a lot. Let's put it with Rizzo. It's just to leaven it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the vaunted B4, the B4 Buffaloes.
Yeah.
What an amazingly lucky thing that was to get transferred into that company. an astonishing group of folks that are kind of legendary for their togetherness. I mean, you guys have Zoom calls, you have reunions, you're like a class within a class, for goodness sake.
It was. It still is. I mean, it's great doing
What do
things
you
with
attribute
those
that
guys.
to? I've asked Chris Bump, I've asked Catherine Ann Stewart Kelly, Cask. I always ask, I've had Dan Schaefer. I always like to ask, what is it about that company? What do you think it was?
Me, of course.
It's funny. They all say that.
No, I don't know. We had great leaders. Wade Yost and Pete Feeney were the two company commanders first year. And people who have led.
Basically, after graduation, you guys seem to have stayed in touch.
Yeah. Not real closely at first. I think that we've mostly gotten together through, and Kathy was also very instrumental for doing the classmates' birthdays and everything. If you remember that effort through email and the listserv.
She was also very instrumental. She was a big player in getting our class bulletin board going around 2005 or 6, somewhere in there. So there was a bulletin board for a while, pre-Facebook.
Yeah, the listserv. Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's how I actually got to know her, because of the bulletin board. I didn't really know her at school.
Yeah. And she did a book club through that too. That was a lot of fun to participate in.
That's great.
But
now, what was it? So was the company more of a normal company at school, and then you all just had a few people that were very connective afterward? Is that the story, I think?
We had our even at school, I don't think that we were pretty unique as a company. I remember first semester of Cow year, I lived with Bonehead and Scott Gehrig. And
who's Bonehead? Just for those of us at home.
Oh, Chris Greer. Sorry, he was a wrestler. Pretty sure he was All-American wrestler. Not a lot of fun. You talked in one of the more recent ones about cutting weight for 150s football. Yeah, he was cutting weight a lot for wrestling, and not always the most enjoyable thing, but person when he was doing that.
Chris Greer cutting weight is the source of some very legendary stories.
Yeah,
That's now for those classmates who don't know.
Yeah.
Sadly, he passed away some years ago, but he used to stand on his head. Dan Schaefer told me the story. He used to stand on his head in the sauna because he thought somehow that would cut weight faster than sitting normally.
We weren't with most of the company. There were only about 3 rooms that were on a floor below the company. Yeah.
I was in C4 as a plebe, so I know that area very well. Yeah, there was a couple of funny dimensions in that area.
Right. We lived in the room that was above the sally port that aimed straight down in front of the soup's house.
Yep.
And so while we were in that same room, I somehow got the clever idea to go up to the Broodlers place up there and buy a couple of strings of Christmas lights. And I fashioned a peace sign out of the wire hangers that we had.
Yes, you did. I was in I3 right around the corner. I remember this.
There was hung that in our window. So I don't know if this is true. This is, again, rumor control. But Dusty, the soup's wife, apparently liked the fact that this peace sign was right down the street where she could see it prominently. But we were made to turn for energy conservation reasons.
We had to keep America strong and conserve that energy. Well, it was in C4 that Howie Curtis, Dusty, also caught sight of a beer on the ledge there. So that was a kind of a dangerous place to be displaying things in retrospect.
Yeah, yeah.
Good for you. Well, what was your course of study? Now, you very active in scuba and ski and all sorts of things. Just looking at your howitzer, what was your course of study?
I was an aerospace engineering major.
Really?
Yeah.
What was the thinking there?
That was the same major that I had at University of Minnesota, and
Okay.
I was good in science and math in high school. So, and I used to fly model airplanes with my dad a bunch.
Okay.
So I figured that was a good path to go down. One of the classes I took at Minnesota after my career got diverted, at least academically, was psychology. I took it at a night school course, and it was fascinating. I love that. It was great.
Oh, wow.
We had a great teacher, and it was like a 3-hour lecture 2 nights a week. And he started off every lecture by picking something out of the news or something that was relevant, something that was that we would all know about, and then talking about whatever we were going to talk about, connecting that to what was going on in the
Great way to teach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Making it very relevant and interesting.
Yeah.
And then how did you take courses at the academy around that, or was it pretty much locked into?
Well, so you couldn't, you couldn't, everybody had to take psychology.
Right.
There. And you couldn't, what's the word I'm looking for? When we took all the tests beforehand, in order to not
validate out, I think.
Yeah, you couldn't do that with psychology. And I found out afterwards, when I was studying Eisenhower, that he's the one who implemented that. He thought it was important that all cadets understand psychology.
At least have a little bit to help assist in the leadership side.
Yeah.
Now,
but I hated it. Every example, everything dealt with the Army and how to deal with NCOs and how to motivate soldiers. And maybe I just wasn't broad-minded enough to.
You could take a neat topic and armify it, armyify it, and it gets less.
Yeah, and I didn't want to spend. So
watercolor painting. Now watercolor paint the side of a tank. Well, that's not the same.
Yeah, that probably would make me, if I was interested in painting and had to learn that at West Point, I wouldn't want to learn painting through West Point.
100% got it. I had a similar experience.
Yeah, and so engineering's much more straightforward. But so another acronym too that has been mentioned on here a bunch, and I think really deserves, is HPA.
Yeah.
House plants and animals.
House plants and animals. Man, oh man.
So I was and also if I had decided to study for my 4 years there psychology, it would have been under the behavioral science and leadership department, SNL, which was bullshit and lies. So being an HPA BSL guy,
it's like you went to a completely different place with all these different departments I've never even heard of. You're a genius, Riz. Now, because I do this, I have a chance to talk to folks on this podcast. I'm a bit of a student of the howitzer, and so I go in and I look up everyone's.
Yeah.
Your write-up is genius. Who wrote that?
Me and Wade Yost did each other's.
Very well done, and he wrote it like a book report. What was it? What was he mimicking?
No, the template for doing that was what we were given as cadets, and said, "Don't talk about the rack. Don't talk about this." It was all the instructions that we had for doing.
That's funny. So you just literally wrote the instructions
Yeah, that's why,
So
it doesn't say.
for classmates, go to your howitzer and look up Daniel Francis Rizzo's howitzer entry.
And
It
that
basically
picture,
says it's genius. It's so self-referential. It says Daniel never talked about the rack, never talked about ex-girlfriends, never talked about it. Just it. I laughed like heck when I saw it. It's brilliant. It's
yeah,
really well done.
yeah.
Right. I'm not bored when I'm
I
reading it, but
actually
it's worth a look.
showed that at the Alumni Association Founders Day dinner here
It's great.
a few years ago. And so Mike Flanagan was the guy running it. And we had, now his name just slips my mind. Another classmate who was general, just recent, Wesley.
Eric Wesley, yeah.
Eric Wesley,
Yeah.
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 He said beforehand, we're going to have some fun with you. And I said, I don't care. That's all.
Yeah.
And so they showed the picture and they read that that thing. And the picture is, very horrible too. I'm like, I was in the middle of
It's not,
blinking, half asleep, and I don't. I seem to remember having a dispute with somebody when we had to pick out the not negatives, but the proof copies
right.
that we wanted. One for giving to our families, which was a great picture, and my mom has that, and we, that.
You look at handsome and in a good mood
And I
in
said,
that
well,
one, and then we got the one in here.
I want that proof for both of them. Oh, can't do that. Well, then I'm not picking a one that I want for the howitzer.
Right.
And so they did it.
I think that's a wise move, though, because I'm sure that you were put on the mantelpiece much more than people staring at your picture in this thing. So,
yeah, I mean, I get to see that. I don't want to,
Well, there you go. And it gets to be on every one of your name tags at the different reunions.
Right.
So,
if I could have had a picture with, there you go.
So, at what point did you find that armor was your branch? I love asking the people who went armor about the branch, because there's always the wildest reasons why people went armor. What was it about?
Yeah, especially since I was enlisted signal too.
Right. What's up with armor?
So my dad was a tanker.
Okay.
And when we were living in Brooklyn, he was in the National Guard, and I was like 5 or 6 years old. He told my mom, okay, we're going out to do maneuvers, and I'm going to be driving my road march only a block away from the house. So go out on the corner at this time. And my dad gave me my first ride on a tank when I was like 5 or 6 years old. We only went, one block and hopped off and everything. But
that would make an impression.
Oh, yeah. It did make a big impression. I was able to reciprocate while I was at Fort Pope. Yeah.
That's great.
And I knew I was getting out of the Army at that time. And my brother didn't really have thoughts about going to Tulane, but it was a good excuse to bring the family down and see Mardi Gras. And my folks actually came to Fort Pope too.
Okay.
My old unit, at that time I was working in the public affairs office, but 370 Armor was the battalion that I was assigned to. And they were out in the field. They were doing gunnery, table 8 or something. But I arranged for my dad and my brother to be able to go down range. This was in 89, probably that 89, 90.
Yeah. Boy, the things you can do before 9/11, Riz.
Right, exactly.
My dad, my brother, the range.
So that was my dad's last ride in a tank.
Well, it's slightly upgraded from his version, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. And so his unit transitioned from M48s to M60s, We had M68-3s when I was at Fort Polk.
Did you really?
And we transitioned to M1s.
M1s. There you go.
Yeah.
What? So armor was it from day one. So
No. I had to go combat arms because where I
Okay.
graduated in the class in the middle. And I figured, yeah, I was thinking signal, but I couldn't have, I would have been branched out or not been able to get that. So I had to go, um,
armor.
combat arms. If I had to pick one of the three combat arms, that's what I was going to do.
Now you were.
And so I knew Fort Polk too. No, I had a story that was similar to Bump's too, about going to jungle school and
When you were a kid, you went to jungle school.
we both went together to jungle school. In fact, he talked about the stories there, but he didn't specifically mention any of the stories. And I have to just talk about one because
Sure. Anything that calls out Dirty Bumper is good. Is all good with me.
yeah, and so there were a lot of what classmates I remember there too. I didn't remember Tom Ken was there too. He just reminded me last year at Army Navy that I had showed him how to tie knots and make a shelter and everything. I don't remember doing that, but but anyway, when we first got there, and Bump was telling it, we went to briefings about all the barrack things to watch out for.
Yeah,
it was in a bunker. It was in a World War II cement bunker, a room that was, all concrete. And there was maybe 100 of us in there on folding chairs. And in the front of this room that was maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 feet wide by 100 feet deep, that is where they showed us slides of all the things to avoid out there. And they actually had some samples there too. They had a snake, the fur-lance snake that they showed. I was so glad I never saw any of those things.
Right.
And for real in the jungle. But so they were handling the snake. It was in a box, like an ammo box, a big wooden box. And they had one guy who was, the snake handler.
Right.
And he opens the box and he has this long stick with a hook on the end of it. And he grabs the snake and then, whoops, losing control of it. And it went flying right into me. Folding chairs going everywhere.
Was it a legitimate accident or was it part of a thing he did?
Yeah, it was a rubber snake. It was. And we, of course, were all rolling on the floor. Let's see this. Yeah, the NCOs
down there and never got old.
Yeah. So many other stories from jungle school too. But anyway, so that brings us back to CTLT summer and going to Fort Polk too. And
you went to Fort Polk for CTLT.
Yeah, and then I was stationed there too. That was my first duty assignment.
And did you choose it? I mean, in other words, you were ranked in armor to the point where Fort Polk was a conscious choice, or did I'm asking that?
Fort Polk was a conscious choice. I didn't have a problem with Fort Polk. A lot of people, especially Mike Flanagan, talked about his wife's reaction when he was at the advanced course. And he, after lunch on the day that they found out, he came back and said, I have to change with somebody. I can't go to Fort Polk. But there were plenty of things to do there. Within a 30-minute drive, there was a festival every weekend going on there. So, you could go there and enjoy the culture. I actually bought a house there and had a garden and did, gardening there.
If you think about when you're in the Army, you don't have a lot of time to do anything but fort things. So whether you're at Polk or Stewart or where
Right.
Fort is, you're working all the time. So
Right.
you could be at Fort Dix in New Jersey and not see New York City for 2 years. Right?
Well, if you did that, shame on you. That
Yeah, right. You got out.
you should experience. I mean that, and so I love going to New Orleans, which they seem to schedule field training for us during Mardi Gras time for like the first 3 years I was there.
That was part of their DUI mitigation program.
Yeah, yeah. but no place that I've ever visited has had better food, better music, better bunch of people that enjoyed a good time partying and everything. And I love telling people about being able to get my tank up in the air, but out at NTC one time, you guys talk about all the tactical things that you did
Yeah.
at NTC. I talk about the fact that my guys and I was an XO at that time, but they found this hill where you could get up enough speed getting up to it that you could actually get your tank up in the air. So I told my driver, out. I want to drive my tank and make sure it gets up in the air. And yeah, not very much aeronautical or
But somehow you could have graphed the curve on it or something, right? I mean, right? Calculating the size of wing you would need to keep it in the air. That would be,
right.
That'd be a big wing, admittedly. Now I looked at your LinkedIn and you went to Northwestern in 1997.
Yeah.
How long were you in the Army? Did you stay for 5 or 10?
I got out. First, I was going to get out during the first round of early outs and everything. And I had gotten a job lined up already, in fact, in Longview, Texas. And I went in, and the guy who was the public affairs officer I told him that morning, I said, it's a month before I'm supposed to get out, so I'm going to go start doing my out processing. He laughed. He goes, they just started stop loss. You're not going anywhere. So sure enough, I could not do that.
It caught you up, the stop loss. No kidding.
Yeah, yeah. But sometime I had the opportunity to go to the Pentagon and visit my branch personnel guy. And I said, hey, here's the situation. I'm not going to make the Army a career. I'm not going to go to the advanced course. I've got a job lined up. And he goes, we have plenty of armor officers. You're fine to get out if you want and everything. So, and they were reasonable enough at the place that I ended up working at that they held the job for me until it was like January. I was supposed to get out in August. Okay. I didn't get out until January. I had 2 XO jobs. I was XO of the same armor company that I was a platoon leader in, which was kind of unusual too. Mm-hmm. And then was the XO of our brigade headquarters company too. Okay. And I actually got command time doing that. And there was nothing more fun than that,
So how did you find transitioning out? Like, what was your?
Well, like I said, I had a job lined up already. Right. So it wasn't.
What was it like for you?
Well, I had no problem living on my own and doing things. In fact, I did a few things differently. As when I had beanheads I was responsible for at West Point.
Yeah.
The 2 things about the New York Times. When I wanted to impress somebody, I would go out to formation and say, Smith, what in the world is going on? And, as if I was going to really rip into them.
Right.
And I had trained them and they knew, sir, today in the New York Times, it was reported that. they weren't in trouble or anything. But,
Yeah.
but one thing that they did get in trouble for was that on Wednesdays they had the food section.
And you wanted to know about the food.
I wanted to know what the buy of the week was. They always had some vegetable or some.
Now, was this an interest that it's carried all the way through? Because there's literally on your Facebook page is a picture of you in a grilling apron. So we're going to get there. What was cooking and grilling something when you were young, or did it develop over time? Talk a little about this hobby and passion of yours.
Italian family, both sides of my family. My mom's maiden name is Abadessa, so.
Okay.
And in Brooklyn, they lived a couple. My mom and dad lived a few doors down from each other. And so on all the holidays, we would go and eat at one set of grandparents, and then my brother,
who was 2 years younger than me, for sure,
yeah, would go to the next and eat dinner all over again with the other.
Yeah, right.
So, and I cooked with my grandmothers, both of my grandmothers. When they would visit, we would make stuff. And my mom claims that she never learned to bake because my grandfather owned a bakery. And instead of learning how, they just, bring this home or bring that home. She never had to learn how to bake. But I learned how to bake Italian stuff and to cook and everything from my grandmothers. And,
okay. So that was so thematically, it's always been a part of your interests. I
mean, as far as
those poor plebes trying to work through, and here you come with the food section. You want to know detail.
But I thought it was important to know that there was that resource for cooking and everything there. The other thing I did as president of the ski club and arranging our trip to Killington over Washington's birthday weekend,
right?
We decided that we would get 3 condos or 4 condos. I don't know that. It was actually 5 condos, I think. But anyway, we had our meal allotments from West Point and everything.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to use them and to eat at the restaurants and all the expensive places, since we had condos, I told everybody on like the day before I had to get special permission from my TAC to go into the commissary and
you were way ahead of the game.
Yes, I had mine in front. And I said, whatever I grab and put into my basket here, you 4 guys behind me do put the same thing.
Yeah. And flying in formation.
Right. And so we ended up having plenty enough food. And of course we did eat out some too, but so there was no SOP for doing that either, for being the president of the ski club. The guy who was our officer in charge was furious with me when we graduated and wanted to know for the next year, where's the guy who's going to be president of the ski club? And I said, there is not an SOP. He goes, well, you better write one. I thought,
no, yeah.
I'm graduating in a few weeks.
Sorry.
Thanks, sir.
I'm on my way to Fort Polk. There's no skiing there. Sorry. Phew, off I go. I had to go fly my tank at Fort Polk. Off I go.
Right.
Oh, that's funny. So let's fast forward a little bit. You gave it a whirl at actually doing food as a company. It looked like.
So most of the jobs that I had after getting out of the Army were small manufacturing companies,
right?
Mostly with fasteners too.
Okay.
And ended up in the Chicago area, and that was no problem finding work there. But we were doing remodeling in our house. We lived in Palatine. Right outside of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to build my own wood burning oven. I had a friend in Minnesota who actually had done that. But then I ended up finding a place that I could buy it for $2,000, and we put it on our picnic table in the back, on our back deck. And I said, at least when the kitchen is being torn up and everything for the remodeling, we'll still be able to cook using this oven and everything.
Right.
And I learned how to bake bread without using yeast, naturally leavened bread, which was as much an art as a science to learn how to do that. And then said to myself, and I wasn't working at that time, but I said, I bet you I can make this thing portable. It's 400-pound oven, concrete oven. And I went into Home Depot and got a miter saw table, which was collapsible, modified that in order to hold this oven.
Right.
Be able to put the whole thing into the back of our minivan that we had for the kids and everything for that time, and started a business doing that.
And what was the idea? Was it bread?
No, I did primarily pizza and everything.
Okay, so you would take it around to different locations
we did farmers markets, and then I did I used the farmers. I told people, people would see this operation that we had at the farmers market, and
want to have
said, hey, I can bring this to your backyard this weekend if you want, and set up and make pizzas for you right there.
Yeah.
So that was a food truck kind of thing even before that. That was in 2005 that I set up to do that.
Yeah. That's a little passion project, but obviously the engineering kept the bills paid.
And I wasn't doing engineering then, so I had enough time to dedicate doing that.
Okay.
So I have to give a shout out to another classmate, Dave Sluga.
Okay.
Because this is the connection he doesn't even know. The gal who is in charge of the health department at Palatine, where I wanted to do the farmers market first, I told her what I had planned to do and gave her a diagram, and she came back with a page and a half of requirements of things. Couldn't have coolers, had to have mechanical refrigeration, had to be certified.
Longer than the SOP for the ski club. Page and a half.
Yeah. So I'm sure she didn't think that I was going to pay any attention to doing that.
Right.
But I did. It took me like a month, so I missed out on a month of the farmers market time. But I fulfilled all of her things. And I had to do all of the prep for that in a licensed kitchen. I couldn't be doing it in my house.
Yep.
I had a shared use kitchen that I signed a contract with in Chicago that I was able to do all the prep work for that. And she said, I passed this contract by the lawyers in the township, and they refused to go along with it because there's a clause in there that said I couldn't hold the food prep, the shared use kitchen, responsible for foodborne illnesses. And I said, Diane Sluga was the gal's name. No relation to Dave Sluga, I hope. But I said, I'll show you. I'll set up. I'll make pizzas for you for lunch. You can come down. You can see the whole operation where I'm doing the food prep and everything, and it's clean, and they wouldn't budge.
Yeah, right. So, she was in a difficult spot, I imagine.
Yeah. So instead of doing that, I had done all this prep work and everything, and the people at the shared use kitchen said, "Well, there's somebody else who does something similar, and here's a market that he did last year. He wasn't doing it this year, and it was in Northbrook, which is right by Glen Cove.
I know Northbrook.
By the Naval Air Station in Chicago.
Yep.
So I talked to those people. Those people said, "Great, awesome, come on, do it." Yeah. So I did Saturday mornings there, and my clientele that, I marketed to doing the catering there was all the North Shore, the Gold Coast of Chicago, the very expensive
See, it worked out.
shore. Oh, yeah, it was great.
So how'd the
It was better
classmate get
customers
involved?
than I would have gotten at Palatine, probably.
How'd the classmate get involved other than just having the same name?
No, that's it. I mean, it's a kind of unusual name, and I knew Dave Sluga from the prep school too. So,
Yeah. The entire story is hinged on the classmate. I just had the same last name. I love that. That's my favorite. What? But let's jump. I want to make sure
I'll
we can.
tell a story about him though, if you want.
No, I want to hear about your family, because if we don't talk, I tell you what, the
okay.
only time I get in trouble on this darn podcast is when
I know, not enough
I want
time.
to talk about the kids, and because and then we're doing reshoots. It's like a Hollywood thing. So talk about your family. Just make sure we get everyone involved, because I've
Okay,
on your Facebook as well.
so I'm divorced and have been since 2012, I think,
Uh-huh.
and we were separated before that. But I have two sons.
Mhm.
The older one is Michael. Both of them live with their mom still out in the Chicago area.
Okay.
Um, Michael does game design and is very into Bitcoin and staying up to date on technology and everything. So I get tips and leads from him on that stuff. Younger son, David, graduated from Purdue, not last year, but the year before.
Okay.
And now works for a lab that does. So he's a mechanical engineer also.
Yeah.
It was great listening because I could actually remember back to some of the things I had to learn in my engineering classes.
Yeah. Right.
But he works in the civil engineering lab doing cement and concrete testing. And
Purdue's a good school for that, so that's good. He got a good start. Good for him.
Yeah.
And he's based in Chicago as well.
Yes. Yeah.
And where do you live? Because
I live in Richmond, capital of the South.
So, and I say this with jocularity, you've got each of your social media accounts has a different location. Is that part of your disinformation plan? You got Frankfurt, Indiana on one, and
No, that's mostly laziness on the updating that.
you got Virginia on another. So it's all part of your making sure the bad guys don't know where you really are.
Yeah. So after my dad retired from IBM, my sister lived in D.C.
Yeah.
And she had the only grandkids at that time, so they moved to Manassas, Virginia.
Yeah.
They lived in.
So if we were to put together a lunch in Richmond, you'd be the guy to call.
Oh, absolutely, sure, yeah. And yeah, I can do more and more stories too, both from West Point and from
you are part of the
stories from catering.
Let's talk. I want to make sure we get in the Unity call. So we covered the family, which is great. The Unity call, because that's a special thing that you. How did you get involved with that? And just a very brief history of the Unity call and how it came about. Talk us through that, because it's an amazing thing you're doing there.
Yeah. So I've had my mental health situations, and I actually went to a psychologist for a while and had to learn. I don't remember it being a big part of the psychology class that I liked or the ones that I didn't at West Point, but learned to utilize cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
I know it.
And it helped me a lot. And the woman who I saw for a while was a great help. And so I'm having done that, I was very sympathetic with John Ponce's postings about learning about
there for a while. Yeah.
Classmates that had taken their own lives and everything. And his effort to make sure that there are people in our class who are going to be there to help people who are in that situation. So it was, posting and talking with John that made me initially get involved in that. And there were enough of us regulars on there that got enough benefit out of it. Bob Albino says that we're each other's therapists as well as patients. The fact that we shared 4 years of the most rigorous college experience you could ever have in this country.
Who's welcome to join the Unity Call?
Everybody is welcome.
Everybody's welcome.
If somebody has a problem that's family related, legally related, mental health related, even though Scott Womack is the VA guy for our class,
yep.
Bob Albino has dealt with the VA enough that he can give you some help too and struggles with that.
He has a remarkable level of knowledge.
Yeah.
Bob did. Yeah. Okay.
So, we encourage people that come on that want to talk about those things. And, and it is confidential. I am conscious of that now after John Ponce.
Well, that's great. That's the next step. What is public facing and what is not in terms of giving us a steer? So Sallyport is a closed environment where only our classmates can see that.
Right. Okay. And the same goes for the class of 86 section of Facebook.
Okay.
So that's where the list is with the dates and everything, and that's where.
Okay. So who attends? Who's kind of on the duty roster is public, but obviously anything said on the call is private.
Right.
Okay, got it.
So the scuba club is one thing. That's one thing. I tried to have as much fun, and so that's a theme for my whole life. I tried to have as much fun at Fort Polk as I could. I tried to have as much fun at
I want to give you a shout out, right? So as a student of the Howitzer, I go in there and I see that there's a lot of people who are like in the scuba club, the ski club, they're, plebe year and maybe sophomore year, and then they quit. And everybody kind of samples a bunch of stuff. But you're a hero. You stayed committed to the scuba and ski club 4 years. You're like if that was core squad, you'd be like on the, you'd be on the wall at a plaque for goodness sake. So 2 clubs, 4 years. That's amazing. And you ended up being the president of the ski club, though you left without leaving an SOP, and we're still all a little sideways about that. So go ahead about the scuba club.
How fantastic to have a ski slope right where I was going to college.
Yeah.
So, that was great. But the scuba club, so one thing I didn't get to do plebe year, we went on, but plebe year we couldn't go on the scuba club spring break trip. I had heard about that and went the next year when we were yearlings and had such a blast that I said, this is going to be something I do regularly.
Scuba, yeah.
Well, the firsties running the scuba club the next year said they weren't going to do the spring break trip. And so...
Class 84?
Yeah.
So what'd you do?
No, that was 85.
85.
Yeah, that was Mayor Cows.
That makes sense.
I went as a yearling, and as a cow.
That's right. You went as a yearling, but as a cow.
So Mike Switzer, Andy Yeager, and I said, no, we want to do that. We're not going to be firsties, but we're going to do the spring break. So we set it up and organized it. We got a C-130, and that was an Air National Guard. Somebody's dad, I think, decided they needed some training time flying us down to Florida. And,
Did you do all the cooking for that one too? Did you cook for that one? Did you do all the cooking for that one too?
I didn't, but my grandparents lived in Fort Lauderdale at that time. So
there you go.
Yeah, we would go out diving and bring back our catch, lobsters and stuff, up to Fort Lauderdale, have dinner with my grandparents, and then go down to the Strip. That was when Fort Lauderdale was doing spring break.
Right.
and
And you had to go
drink
spend the other
and
half
party and
living.
be crazy all night until like 5 in the morning, then drive down to Homestead Air Force Base.
So now let me ask, did the Class 85 cadets in the scuba club go after they had refused to
I
organize
think
it?
one did. I think that there was one guy who did.
I didn't had him over there filling up the air tanks. So that you don't get to go to
Um,
the strip with us.
I think he redeemed himself by having renting a car down there. They were
Okay.
all
All right. Well, that's
that
all's
was
fair then. All the movies.
transportation for
But
us.
the rest of them, no, you scrub the fins or whatever you do. I've never known scuba, but you you spit into the mask. Isn't that what you do
Yeah,
in the scuba? You spit
yeah.
in the mask? I don't know. Riz, it was so great to talk to you. Thanks so much, brother. It was great
It
to hear
was
your
an
story.
awesome pleasure to be here doing this. And like I said before, I watch them regularly, usually within a few hours of when
Good,
they get
good.
posted.
Well, that's great. And now you're in the canon of the class. I love it. Thanks so
Yeah.
much for being on. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Paul. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.